Hi guys, it is Chloe again, and once again, I'm also apologizing for being sick, and I'm going to do my best to hide it from you yet again. But for this video, I have been trying to figure out for some time now what I wanted to do it on, and I decided to take some matters from my personal life and apply them to this video to hopefully raise awareness on ableism and the disabled body. I became inspired by an individual I work closely with. For him, I received this inspiration because I work so closely with him day in, day out. For some time now, I've been his caregiver, and he happens to be a quadriplegic. And from working so closely and interpersonally in his life, I have been able to become more aware and more sensitive to some of the issues that do arise in his life, like the way others feel that they need to treat him, or some of the obstacles and hurdles he has to overcome just to live his life to the degree that we would be able to do as able-bodied individuals. I now also pay attention, a significant amount of attention actually, to the places I frequent the most to know whether or not that they are handicap accessible, in hopes of finding some places for him and I that we can go together. Oftentimes I find these places are too difficult for him to access, just like the other weekend I went to Sing Farm, and he's really into eating vegan and all organic, and so this was a place that he's been wanting to go to. So knowing I was going, he asked me to keep an eye out, look around, see if it's something he could do. And to no surprise, as many other places I have found, no, they're not really handicap accessible, and they might claim to be, they might say that yes, they have ramps, but in general, having ramps does not necessarily make something handicap accessible. And sorry, I'm getting off a little bit on a tangent and decide to not stick to the script as much with this one, just being the personal matter, and I'll get into that a little bit later. But another interesting aspect I've become hyper aware of from working with him is how other able-bodied individuals interact with him. We did cover a brief section in Unit 3 that discussed asexual culture for disabled people, but I would like to take this opportunity to backtrack and offer some information on what ableism is and how to essentially avoid it as much as possible. But it does take some degree of awareness and effort to kind of change our ways of thinking, because a lot of us don't even recognize that we do have some degree of able-bodied privilege. Like, did you know that 1 in 5 people in the United States are disabled? That is one misconception people have, is they think that you can see disability, that from looking at an individual you will know that they are disabled, but it's not quite that simple. Yet, discrimination against the disabled community persists and has become almost normalized, even integrated into our cultural understanding of disabled people's experience. Ableism can be defined as discrimination in favor of able-bodied people, according to the Oxford English Dictionary. Ableism can also be associated with a view that disabled persons need to be fixed, or they cannot function as a full member of society, or even that it is a defect rather than just a difference. This is the root of ableism, actually, which allows for many to feel marginalized, discriminated against, and even devalued by society. Here, I'm going to present you some ableistic attitudes that can be corrected with, of course, just some degree of awareness and effort to make these changes. The first is failing to provide accessibility beyond wheelchair ramps. I mentioned that earlier. Places will claim they're handicap accessible because they have a ramp, when in reality that does not mean that it's easily acceptable for somebody in a chair. Number 2 is using ableist language. This is something that I have become extremely sensitive to, and a lot of times people don't even realize that they're doing it. When you use words like retarded or insane or crazy, these are kind of enforcing a negative connotation on people with disabilities without even realizing that you're doing so. To you, they are just terms, but to somebody else, that could be an extremely derogatory term to describe somebody who does not fit that description. 3, able-bodied people failing to check their privilege every once in a while. Plenty of individuals may not directly discriminate against people with disabilities, but they do so by using resources specifically provided for them. And I know that we are all guilty of this to some degree. Say you're waiting in a long line at Walmart to use the restroom, and the only restroom that's available is the handicap restroom. Most people are going to use it. But these sort of attitudes, assuming that you have the right just because it's open to a little bit more privacy, a little bit more space, when, say, right after you, a disabled person comes in. That restroom is there specifically for them, and it's no longer open to them because an able-bodied individual felt that they had the right to occupy it. You can also see this with elevators. When you go to the mall and everyone packs into that elevator just in hopes to get to that second floor. Then all of a sudden, an individual in a wheelchair rolls up and it's full. He can't fit in. He can't use the stairs. Where us able-bodied individuals could have easily used the stairs to go up one floor rather than using an elevator. 4. Assuming people with disabilities have no autonomy. Assuming that they need help without asking for it is a common ableist experience, and that's just something that we all want to be independent, and we don't want to have somebody help us with everything. And so if you see someone sitting there and it clearly looks like they're struggling and need help, offer it, but do not assume that they need it. 5 is feeling entitled to know how people became disabled. This was a big struggle. When I first started working for my client, I didn't know what happened to him, and I never felt that I was in the place to ask, and I waited until he offered that bit of insight into his life to me, and that's the way it should be. They are not obligated to share their experience with you just because they are in that experience, and you have to be considerate of that aspect of their disability. 6, assuming disability is always visible. Oftentimes people totally overlook mental illness as a disability when in fact it is really predominant in the United States specifically, and it is even downplayed. In addition to these common ableist attitudes, I'd like to provide you all with ways to avoid practicing ableism within your own lives. I aim to bring recognition to able-bodied privilege and talking about it and providing ways to avoid it. 1, an easy one, I know it's quite exhausting, but take the stairs. If you have the option to take the stairs, do it, because when you are using that elevator instead, just out of sheer laziness, somebody could truly need that spot because they can't get up otherwise. Obviously, there are exceptions to this, but the vast majority of us are able to take the stairs. Number 2, don't use handicap restrooms. I feel that this one's kind of a given, and it really comes down to your convenience versus somebody else's necessity, and obviously that outweighs your convenience. 3, don't patronize the individual with a disability. There's no need to apply stereotypes or assume any less of them. Number 3 leads right into number 4, which is don't address them through an able-bodied person. This one's a little bit more complicated, but pretty much comes down to not making the assumption regarding that person's ability to communicate or comprehend, and definitely do not try to address them through a third party due to that same assumption. So that means speak directly to them. Don't make any assumptions going into that interaction, and definitely don't try and go around them and ask if the person they're with, if they're able to talk. 5 is don't ask what happened. We went over that one, and I know I'm sounding a bit repetitive, but these are really essential to just overcoming an ableistic perspective and being able to better understand disabled experience. 6, make sure all venues are accessible. This is one that I try and go about every day in my life. I look around, I make mental note for my client. His name is Mark. Can he come here? Can he access this easily? And of course, there's those processes that he could take if he wished to make sure that any venue was accessible to him, but that is a hassle, and that is not his responsibility. That should be us as a society who looks out for those sort of things for him. 7, avoid misguided comments. For example, I wish I had a chair. Like, you see those people in the grocery store who use the carts, the automatic carts, when they really don't need them, just, again, out of convenience. And this can be extremely offensive to a disabled individual. 8, don't assume that an individual wishes that they were able-bodied or even that an able body is what is normal, because really, in reality, what is normal? Normal is entirely subjective. 9, don't call them inspirational. This is extremely superficial and can be interpreted in so many wrong ways, and this is one that I struggle to find a balance, because Mark has been very influential on my life as a person, and for a while I mistook that I mistook that for inspiration when it really wasn't the emotion I was feeling. There's much more to him than that. And 10 is remember that people with disabilities are people first. So that pretty much means don't see them for the disability. When I describe my client to somebody, I don't first right off the bat be like, oh, by the way, he's in a chair. There are so many other things to the individual than their disability. And I'd like to apologize for being slightly repetitive throughout this video, but I highly encourage these practices, and it's extremely difficult to understand another person's experience without being fully aware of the person and the individual. And as number 10 states, people with disabilities are people first, and as long as you keep this in mind, it may become easier to recognize an able-bodied privilege from our own perspective. And that is all I have for you today, and thank you for watching again.